Hello, guys, and welcome to this week's Indie Wednesday Writing Community Chat Show. And it's good to be back and chatting on the show. It's been a couple of weeks, actually, where things have been up and down, in between seasons. But we have a great show for you today. And in a minute, Mr. Hooley will introduce the author for today. But just before I do that, we do have a show sponsor for tonight for the Beer Token book promotion. And that person, his name is Skip Mondragon. And I'm not sure if that's actually his pen name, but if it is his real name, that's pretty awesome. But his book, Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps, and it's lessons learned from an amateur wrestler's fight to triumph over depression. And you can follow him at Skip WNW. And I am going to open this beer in a minute and enjoy that. So thank you very much for sponsoring the show. And someone has written that this book is a real life story of a courageous army colonel and doctor who openly shares his journey of emerging success in dealing with and accepting his own depressions. And that's really well rated on Amazon. So please do check that out. And I will stick his book cover up in the top corner once I find it, that is. And there you go, Wrestling with Depression. And please have a look into that for him. And thank you very much. So, Chris...
I love a title with a metaphor. It's fantastic. Today's author is, I can't wait to speak to her. She's absolutely amazing. And her book is out now, so you can get it. And we're going to talk about it with her today. So without further ado, Sophie Cousens, here she is.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm really pleased to be here today.
Very excited to have you on. And thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure. And just so we can show the people who's watching this the cover of this book, because it's very magical, I want to say.
Sparkly. I've got one here. Look.
Yes, there you go. It's on the screen there and in your hand. Yeah.
So technically pro. I like this.
It doesn't happen a lot. So just this time next year, I was very confused by your pinned tweet because it said my book is out this time next year, out today. And I was trying to work out if you meant that was out a year today, but it was actually the title of your book. So I was really confused.
That is a bit confusing, actually. Yeah.
But so in terms of the cover, did you have a lot of input on that cover?
I didn't really, actually. Penguin had got a very clear idea, I think, of how they wanted to position this, because it's sort of, I suppose, high-end commercial women's fiction. I mean, I don't know. It's all, again, quite new to me, but just that it looked kind of quite shiny. And I think the foiling, I love the idea of it when they said they wanted the foiling. And sadly, you don't really get to see that when it's on just the Kindle. And so, but whereas when I got it in the post for the first time, and it just does look really cool because it's all sort of raised and shiny, and it's got all these fireworks that really do kind of pop as fireworks. So I was really happy with it. But yeah, I wouldn't know where to begin with inputting on book covers. So I was quite happy that someone just said, hey, what do you think about this? This is the kind of style that I think they were, trying to go in the same vein of kind of Beth O'Leary and Josie Silver. Those are the kind of writers my book is kind of trying to place next to. So they all had a plan with the cover. Yeah.
For those who don't know, your book is in the romantic comedy sort of genre, and it is, I guess, along the categories that you spoke about. So that cover it does project what the story is sort of surrounding. So for those who don't really know, can you explain a bit better than what I'm trying to say there?
So the story is, it's a romantic comedy, and it's basically about a guy and a girl who were born on the same day in the same hospital, 1 minute apart. And basically their mothers were very, very different. But they had this connection of the fact that they were born in the same place. And then 30 years later, they happened to run into each other at a party, which happens to be both of their birthdays. And they kind of reconnect. And the book basically takes place in the present tense between 2020 and 2021. And then you see all these flashbacks to New Year's Eves of the past, where you see where Quinn and Minnie, my hero and heroine, were on their birthdays in years before. And those flashbacks sort of illustrate why they are like they are in the present. And it's kind of about fate and luck, and whether you can be born lucky or whether we make our own luck. And it's all about family and friendship and cooking. There's lots of pies in it. And yeah, it's sort of very much romantic comedy, but with a bit of heart, and addresses a few serious issues as well.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of kind of mental health and stuff in there. So something for everyone, I hope.
So there's a big connection with New Year's Eve.
Yes.
And what was the draw for you with that? Why was it such an inspiring part to put in the book?
Well, interestingly, there's a lot of Christmas books in like commercial women's fiction. There's a lot of Christmas books. I think people love that time of year. It's very kind of warm and cozy and celebratory. But New Year's Eve, I feel, it's such a juncture for people, because I think if you're having I think it's a time to kind of take stock and reflect on your life, isn't it? New Year. It's always sort of, you take a moment to look back at the year that's been and the year ahead. And I think if you're somewhere that you want to be, it can be really exciting, and you can say, oh, wow, I've done all those things this year and I'm really looking forward to doing this next year. But if you're not where you want to be, it can actually be a little bit depressing. If you're single and you don't want to be single, and you haven't got someone to kiss at midnight. So I think it can be quite a divisive day of the year, because great for people who are where they want to be, not so great for people who aren't. And Minnie and Quinn, my hero and heroine, Quinn loves New Year. He always sort of sees it as a chance to have a new beginning and, opportunity to achieve something. Whereas Minnie feels that she has this jinx that follows her around, and she just is incredibly unlucky on New Year's Eve. So she always tries to stay in and avoid parties, and just puts her head under the duvet and hopes it's all going to go away.
Is Minnie... Sorry, Chris, go on.
No, I was going to say, so Sophie, when you sit down to actually write a novel like this, that you said takes place over the course of a year, but with flashbacks in it, how do you go about even starting to write something like that? Is there a lot of planning involved?
So I've only really recently heard this term, the whole planning pantser thing, which I'm sure you guys are you guys planners or pantsers? What are you?
I'm a panther.
Yeah.
Well, Chris being a panther is actually a running joke throughout the show.
Oh, right. Okay.
When we were introduced to the idea, he said he was a panther, so he's in a league of his own.
Forevermore panther.
Well, I try and do a bit of planning. And then, but to be honest, some of my kind of what I feel are my best ideas only turn up when I'm writing. So I kind of like to I knew that I wanted the book to start at New Year and end at New Year and have lots of New Years in between. But beyond that, I didn't really know where it was going. But actually, I'm now writing a book 2, that's not nearly so formatted. And I'm actually finding it a lot harder. Whereas this, I actually found it sort of, the tight structure of it, I almost found it much easier to write, because I just knew I was going to have, what's happening in the present day, and then a little kind of glimpse of the past that kind of illustrates almost the behavior of the characters. If Quinn is a little bit of a commitment phobe and has issues with relationships, and so you'd sort of see him in the present acting in a certain way, and then flash back to him on a date with a past girlfriend in New Year. So I kind of knew exactly the kind of little things I wanted to drop in to illustrate issues with family or relationships or things like that. So it kind of just felt quite logical, actually, almost in the way that it came together. Whereas I think sometimes if you're writing, if you're sort of sometimes sitting there going, what happens next? Oh, I don't know. So I did actually find that kind of tightly structured nature of it easier to write in a way.
I think for new writers, it's really important to sort of experiment with that, is getting your sort of panzer type writing. Give that a go and maybe do structured writing, see how it works, and you probably find your own sort of in between, won't you? And I think it's a very exciting way to write. I find it exciting anyway.
Because I read recently the Stephen King on writing, and he says he doesn't plan anything, because he just sort of almost says he's so character driven. He just wants to think of an amazing character, pop them into a scenario like Misery, where it's like, a writer who's been stranded with a psycho fan, and then he just sort of sees what happens. And I think, and he says that's the joy of it for him, of kind of just seeing where it takes him. And I know other writers who just literally, they have their bullet point of each chapter. They know exactly what's going to happen. But I think a lot of us are all in the middle somewhere, aren't we?
Where did the inspiration for the name Minnie Cooper, where did that come from?
Well, I knew that I wanted to play with this idea that the hero had almost felt like he'd been born lucky, where, basically he's born a minute before Minnie in the hospital, and they're both born in 1990 on the 1st of January. And there's a newspaper prize being run where the first 90s baby in London wins 50 grand. So he's born 1 minute early.
Wow.
And he wins 50 grand. And she's born just like 1 minute too late. And to be honest, Minnie's family, she could have used the money a lot more than Quinn. And so her mother sort of starts this narrative that she was born unlucky, always a minute too late, and that luck bad luck follows her around.
Yeah.
And also another thing that happens in the hospital is that the two mothers are in labour together. And Minnie's mother is sort of helping out Quinn's mother because she's not given birth before, and she's given her all these tips. And she even tells her the name she's going to give her child. She says, I've got this name I really want to call my child, whether it's a boy or a girl. I'm going to call it Quinn, which is a lucky name. And then when Quinn's mum wins the prize, she goes on the news and says she's calling her baby Quinn. So Minnie's mum doesn't think she can use the name that the baby that's in the paper that's been born first. So she ends up losing her name and getting called Minnie when they kind of forget that her surname's Cooper. So she ends up with this name that kind of brings her nothing but bad luck because she's her whole life for being named after a car, and she has lots of kind of vroom jokes at school. And I just like the idea that it was this one moment that changed so much for her because she didn't win the prize money. She lost out on the name she was supposed to have. And all of that really went on to affect her life in quite a negative way.
Can we talk about how this came around then? Because you obviously worked in TV and production before this. So what was the kind of driving force behind you wanting to write stories?
Well, I've always wanted to write, I'd say. I mean, I think, again, I'm sure you guys are the same. Like, I think there's just a bug that you have, isn't there, where you want to write. And then in my 20s, I out of university, I went straight into working in TV. I was a runner and then a researcher, and then ended up working, in comedy entertainment on shows like Ant and Dec and Graham Norton and stuff. And I was always writing in the background, not in this genre, actually, funny enough. The first manuscript I finished was a sci-fi young adult fiction book, which never got published. But I've always kind of dabbled. And then I think I actually moved away from London, and I now live in Jersey in the Channel Islands. And I couldn't really work in TV anymore. So then that was the kind of push to be like, right, let's give writing another go, dedicate a bit of time for it, try and have another push. And so that's kind of where my hobby managed to sort of push itself to the fore. But it's always been there. It's always been, ticking away all the ideas for writing. And
so did you have a lot of use a lot of the experience you had in your sort of production time with the comedy to put into your book? Because there's a lot of humor in there, isn't there?
Well, funnily, so before this one, I did write an ebook I won a competition to be published with Corvus that was called How to Get Ahead in Television. And that was very autobiographical, actually. That was based on a lot of behind the scenes stories about working with diva presenters and, the kind of stuff you're asked to do when you're a runner on TV. So this, I think that kind of set the tone for the kind of humor I wanted to write. And then with this, it's not at all autobiographical. And again, a bit more structured, but I think that kind of humor of the absurd and sort of putting my characters in very silly situations is definitely something I enjoyed writing on the ebook.
So Sophie, you're the theme of this book with the idea of fate and luck. What has your experience been with these sort of topics, and why did you want to write about them?
Oh, good question. It's an interesting one, actually, because I'd say the central theme of this book is, can you be born unlucky or do you make your own luck? And I don't know still the answer to that question. And that's why I think it's almost interesting, because I don't know anyone who'd come down really fiercely on either side in a way. I feel like a lot of life is how you perceive it, in terms of, I think you can, obviously I am very lucky in many ways. I'm getting the opportunity to do what I love as a job. I've got a lovely family. I'm healthy. You can count so many things you're lucky for, but then equally there's other things that you can always be, I wish I was selling more, or I wish I had a bigger house or a bigger car, or, you can always compare yourself to other people, and you can couch yourself as either lucky or unlucky. And so I feel it is a lot about perspective. And my characters in the book, Minnie, she has this quite negative outlook at the beginning, where she just says, "Oh, I'm unlucky. You know, bad things happen to me." Whereas Quinn has this feeling of, even though he's been born in a far more affluent family, actually his outlook, where, you know, come on, you've got to make your own luck. You've got to turn your business around. If your business is failing, you know, you've got to be the one to sort it out. If life isn't going your way, make it go your way. And I think all of us are probably somewhere in the middle of those two outlooks. But I think it's just an interesting thing to examine. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you believe in luck? Do you believe it kind of...
I know people who are seemingly luckier than others, but I really do think people talk a lot about manifesting their thoughts, and, you know, constantly believing that something good will happen, will lead to that. Whereas if you say, for example, Minnie's character was so believed that she was so unlucky all the time, then she may not try, as if she was, say, an author. Oh, my book's not selling, so I'm not going to go and push it out there, you know. So actually, she's not helping it sell. Whereas if you believed it will, I'm just going to keep going. Someone's going to see it and end up buying it. So it's almost, you know, you've got to make your own luck in that respect by believing. So perhaps, I don't know.
No, I totally agree. And I do think there's some people who are just, luck seems to go their way in terms of just like, you know, they win the lottery and then they, you know, do this or whatever. And there's other people who have a really unlucky life. But I think most of us are somewhere in the middle. Whereas you say you've got to kind of jump on the advantages you were given and then try and roll with the punches when they come, basically.
Absolutely.
So Sophie, you, with this book, this time next year, you've jumped into a genre that has a very large fan base. Obviously, it's one of the most popular genres out there, but also a fan base with some expectations, and I suppose it's quite irritating in some ways, because they have expectations of what a romantic comedy should be, and then they want it to be a little bit like that, but they also want a surprise because they don't want it to be like everything they've read before. So how did you handle that aspect of things?
Yes, that is a really tricky one, to be honest, because there is a certain formula that people, there has to be a reason the couple don't get together until the 400th page. And then there also, people do kind of want a happy ending. But I think that I tried my best to have surprises about what the happy ending might be. I think you can't have a rom-com where everyone dies at the end alone, unfortunately. But I think that by toying with the idea of what a happy ending is and making the reader think for a moment, oh, hang on a minute, maybe it's not going to be the ending I expect. I think that's all you can hope to achieve, really. But then again, I think you're right. People pick up these books because they know what they're getting to a degree. They want to feel warm and uplifted and life affirming. And I think, again, the fun you can have is with the characters. I've got a lot of a big cast of characters. Someone described it as a bit like, like in For Weddings when you have all the friends. And I think what I had a lot of fun with is actually having a lot of depth to all of those subplots and what they will, I've got one storyline with Bev, who works in Minnie's pie shop, she's having a lot of eco-anxiety, where she watched too much Brian Cox, who basically was sort of saying how our existence on the planet is the equivalent to a blink of an eye, and she's having a huge existential life crisis. And you see her journey through the book as a subplot about how she comes to deal with that kind of thing. And again, I think that's quite original for a rom-com, and that kind of sits alongside the kind of obviously the central relationship. So I think that's how I tried to make it a little bit different and original, is just sort of, having a real depth to the secondary characters, and also just slightly second footing people on. Second footing, is that a term? No, that's not right.
We knew what you meant.
Exactly what a happy ending is.
Did you ever struggle with the names of characters? Because it's something I really struggle with. And if you've got that many characters in your book, did you struggle with it at all?
Yes, and I ended up changing a couple at quite a later date. When you suddenly realise you've got too many B names or something, or something that sounds too, and all, or actually, I think my American editor pointed out that her brother had the same name. William was the same name as someone she was working with, and I just thought, well, that does happen in real life. There are more than one William, but for the sake of the readers, let's just change it, because you don't need anyone else to be confused.
I guess names have a trend at times as well, don't they? Some are popular, some are unpopular at times, so it could be a tricky one. There's a couple of reviews I want to just throw at you that you more than likely you may have seen them because a lot of people do take pride in their reviews. But this the writing was absolutely perfect. First of all, that's you can't get much better than that, can you?
I
In terms of
know.
a review,
some really nice reviews actually, which has been really lovely to read.
Yeah. Definitely a contender for Book of the Year list, which is fantastic. And one that I really like, I was smitten with the story from the first chapter. And that's a really nice comment for a rom-com type writer, because it's, that's what you want them to feel, isn't it?
Yes. And I mean, obviously there's been some absolutely lovely reviews, and it's been really nice to read. And actually what I actually found interesting is that I feel sometimes that as I discovered writing contemporary women's fiction, I sort of suddenly got this feeling that basically I can write in my style of thinking and speaking.
Yeah.
And it felt quite unliterary in a way. I kind of, I've experimented with writing in the past where I feel like I've tried to kind of write in a more literary way. And writing this kind of book just felt that I was actually writing how I think and how people I know talk, and it just felt a bit more informal. So actually to have people say they thought the writing was really good was actually really, really lovely, because I felt in a way that I was kind of, I don't know, that it was just that casual style wouldn't be deemed such good writing in a way. So that was really lovely to read.
There's another one I want to highlight quickly, and that says, this time next year, I think they'll be working on a film. It'll be one of those great British comedies. Now, that is great, but have you ever thought about if this went into movie production, who would you have playing your two main characters?
I have actually, because I used to work in TV as well. Yeah. I do think really visually about story, because obviously, I used to work on scripts and things, and everything I saw as a scene. And sometimes I'd talk to my editor about this, and I'd be like, "Oh, that scene where Minnie," and she's like, "Do you mean chapter?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I do." So I think maybe that's why it's quite kind of feels like it could be a film. But yeah, sadly, weirdly, all of my references for actors are way too old to play the characters in this, because Minnie and Quinn are 30, and I'm a little bit older than that. But I was thinking Daisy Edgar Jones would be brilliant for Minnie. She has the right sort of actually she's way younger than that, but she does have the right look, basically. Or I don't know. Yeah, that is a good question, but no, I don't have a good. I thought about some of the good characters that would be for the mother. So Quinn's mother, I thought would be a brilliant Helena Bonham Carter kind of character. It's like basically Quinn's mother lives in Primrose Hill in a really, really smart house, and seems to have the perfect life, but actually struggles with her mental health. And I just think someone like Helena Bonham Carter would be brilliant at that. But yeah, I mean, watch this space. I'm waiting for the Hollywood to call.
Sophie, would you take a crack at writing a script yourself, or would you be happy to hand the reins over to somebody else in that respect?
That is an interesting question too. I would love to have a go at it, because again, I feel like that's how my brain works. But I think in a lot of cases, if you did ever sell the film rights, I do think they'd probably want somebody to do it who was an expert in that field, I suppose. But it would be lovely to be able to consult or input. I know some writers, if that ever happened and you got a movie deal, that you'd be able to executive produce or weigh in on the script in some way. But yeah, it would actually be quite fun to see how someone else would take. I think sometimes when a writer is just trusted to do it entirely, they almost are trying to be too close to the book. Whereas sometimes if you have a fresh eye come in, they can just pull out the bits that are key in a way that maybe if you're too close to the work, it'd be hard to do.
So what if they said to you that we'll make the book into a movie, but we want to change this part of the book, and it's a massive part of the book to you? Would you let them do it? It was either a movie deal with this change or no movie deal.
Oh, movie deal. Yeah, they can change whatever they like.
Good stuff.
As long as I get one of those chairs, those director chairs.
Yeah.
With my name on.
Action.
Then and a little clipper that I can say. Yeah. They can bastardize it as much as they want.
So, Sophie, without obviously giving any of the book away, are there any characters that you've developed that you think, I'm definitely going to go back to them and at some point in a different book, or I'm going to give them their own book, perhaps?
That's an interesting question as well. So actually, a lot of people who have read and loved the book have said, "Would you think to do a sequel?" And I think some rom-coms just don't lend themselves to being a sequel. Everything is so wrapped up perfectly by the end, and the couple are so perfectly together that there's nothing to revisit. Whereas, funnily in mine, I actually do feel. Interestingly, so she has a very close friendship in the book with her best friend Layla, who's a vet. So Minnie has kind of is quite insecure. She has a lot of self-esteem issues, and her best friend Layla is incredibly confident and sort of boosts her up in a really positive way. And I think their relationship in the book is almost as much of a love story as the male-female love story, because it's all about female friendship and how it can affect your life and how important it is to people's self-esteem. And funnily, if I was going to do a sequel, actually that friendship is something I definitely feel like there's more to explore about. What where does that relationship go? How does life change with your best mate when you're both in relationship suddenly? And that's endlessly interesting to me, I think.
When you mentioned earlier that you had kind of dabbled in other genres before, would you consider writing something else now, or do you think you've actually found your calling in terms of genre?
I mean, so this sci-fi book, which is sitting at the bottom of a drawer somewhere, I do have a real place in my heart for it. Yeah. That I feel like I just think it's quite, I mean, I wrote it now 15 years ago, and I sent it to, I think, 20 agents at the time, got a few nice letters, but, didn't come to anything. But I think at some point in my hopefully long writing life, I will come back to it because there was something in it. But I'd like to establish myself first, obviously, as in this genre. I feel like this really plays to my strengths and to my sense of humor. And it's really fun to write this kind of book. That would be my focus now, but I'd never say never. Like in 10 years time or something, that I might, under a different name, it would have to be probably that you'd suddenly hear Beverly Cousens publishing YA sci-fi. Yeah.
You never know. It could be a whole new trend in a couple of years. Sci-fi comes back around, and that may drop in there. But I don't know. I'm struggling with my identity in terms of genre. I'm moving on from horror to something else now, and we'll see.
And then do you think that might confuse the readers? Exactly, because I think that's the concern, isn't it? If you move and then people pick up your book and they expect it to be the same kind of tick box as what they've had before, basically.
Well, I'll either have to package it in the right way, or I'll have to just change my name as well.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, so good luck.
Yeah, we'll see.
Sophie, we have a few staple writing community chat show questions that we're going to throw at you now, if that's okay. So the first one is, if you could take a character from fiction and make them your own and have a crack at them yourself, either change the original story that they were in or write something entirely new, but with them, who would that character be and why?
Oh, I think so. Have you guys read any Jasper Fforde books?
We've had Jasper Fforde on the show, and I have read his books.
I absolutely love Jasper Fforde. He is one of my kind of comedy heroes. And the Thursday Next series, that was my first introduction. I read them absolutely years ago, but that was my first introduction into that kind of absurdist world. To anyone who hasn't read Jasper, he kind of writes in this alternate universe where Wales is the centre of the UK, and croquet is the national sport, and they smuggle cheese across the border. I mean, it's just so my kind of thing. And Thursday Next definitely is a character who I just love, and I would love to try and dabble in Jasper's world. I would never be able to do it justice because he's so good at it, but that definitely holds a magical place in my writing heart.
Fantastic. And I'm sure there's obviously with Thursday's job, there's probably a lot of fiction that you could explore in that aspect as well, which would be quite interesting. Exactly,
because she basically is kind of a literary, what's it called? Where she basically almost the police force in literature to kind of keep everything. This is the world where you have to keep books from being changed, and she can jump into books and influence the plot and stuff. So again, you can it's endless the kind of fun you could have with Thursday Next and what books you're putting her in.
I was going to ask if there was an author you'd like to work with. If you were to say, there's a story we need 2 writers to write on, who would you choose would that be Jasper Fforde in that sort of world, or would you look at somewhere else?
I think I would actually probably go for David Nichols, just because he is. Oh, I mean, he's probably one of the best in this genre, isn't? I mean, his is probably a little bit more literary, but books like One Day or Sweet Sorrow that are just such a heart-rending and such a kind of. He's just very nuanced the way that he talks about the human experience and character, and I think he'd just be someone I could learn a lot from. I mean, even reading his books, you just it's a masterclass. And also, again, actually, he has been involved in transferring some of his work onto film or screenplay. And again, I'd just be quite interested to absorb some of his talent. If you can do that. I don't know if you can actually do that by just sitting next to someone.
Yeah, I hope so. He actually direct messaged me one day after I sent like a tweet out to him. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God. And my girlfriend was like, what? And I was like, David Nichols has just direct messaged me. And like, I had a little bit of dialogue with him. And it's the best interaction I've had on Twitter.
Oh, and he's so nice on Twitter because he's been doing this thing where he's been supporting debut, because 2020 is obviously a pretty terrible year to have a debut out. And he's been supporting new writers by tweeting about their book when it came out. And so he tweeted about mine as well. I just think that's a really nice thing to do if you're an established writer, to be able to even just do a tiny thing, like put a tweet out for someone who's brand new. It just shows he's a very kind-hearted man, doesn't it?
Yeah, he definitely is. And that leads, it kind of leads us, when you're talking about Thursday and going into books, onto our second question, which is, if you could change the ending to any book that you've ever read, which book would that be and why?
Ooh.
It's the evil question.
I mean, it would probably ruin it. But The English Patient, where obviously I can't remember his name, but the English patient and in the film, the Kristen Scott Thomas character, obviously it's a very unhappy ending, and they don't get together, and she dies and he gets burnt. If I could change any ending, it would be that, and have them have a happy ending, because I think that's one of the most genuinely romantic stories I've ever read. And the most amazing relationships, and it is just it's a tragic story. I mean, it would obviously ruin the book if they had a happy ending, but I would do it.
Do you think there was a point in that writing where they thought about the ending to whether make it a happy ending or not? It would have been quite a pivotal moment in writing that book, wouldn't it?
I know. I think also you would. I mean, the whole story is obviously him looking back at his life and the loss of this great love, so it would not be the same story at all. Or maybe if you could have some epilogue, alternate reality where it will end happily, that would be good.
So Sophie, you often, when you've written your book and you're sending it out to agents and stuff like that, you often agents often ask you to say, what's it like, what's it similar to? So as readers that are potentially looking at this time next year now, who would you recommend this book for? Obviously everyone, but a set type of people as well. Like, if you've liked this, you will like this.
I think anyone who likes, I think comedy wise, if you like kind of Sophie Cousens and that kind of thing, and then story wise, yeah, if you like kind of Beth O'Leary and Josie Silver and the author of Miss You and all these. I mean, One Day, I wouldn't put myself in the league of David Nichols, but in terms of structurally, that idea of sort of jumping through time. So I'd say anyone who loves high-end commercial women's fiction, all of those lovely writers, I think they would enjoy this. Yeah.
Are we able to talk about this or not? And if we can't, that's fine. But you, on your little video, you mentioned Weetabix.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that, or is that like a secret thing you want to say?
It's not a secret thing at all.
Okay.
No, it is. It's just this couple of silly jokes about basically they are having a romantic picnic at one point, but she doesn't really have any great food in the house, so she literally grabs some milk and Weetabix, and that ends up being their romantic picnic. But it becomes a bit of a in joke with them because.
Wow.
doesn't actually matter about the food to make the romance, as long as you're actually having a picnic in the park. Even if
it depends how long you leave the Weetabix in the milk, though, doesn't it? Because if it gets too far, then that's no,
No, that's no good.
Nah.
But, my book is very British, and it's being published in America as well, which is really exciting. But it's funny, some of the things the American editor has wanted to change, and Weetabix was one of the. They were like, they're not going to know what this is. You need that needs to come out.
But then, how could that change? You can't change that.
Well, I think I had to just clarify that it was like a cereal. And then there was another reference. I'm obviously secretly obsessed with Weetabix because there was another reference to it that just came out. But yeah, it's really interesting actually seeing some of the stuff that was changed for the American edition that I wouldn't have necessarily even like registered, So that's been quite an interesting process.
Have you go on?
Sorry, I was going to say, a Weetabix, like, people like to know about an author's routine for some reason when they're writing. I think it adds a sort of like adds to the mystery and the magic of that book being created. So a Weetabix part of your ritual, or like, what is your ritual like?
You know what? My ritual has really changed because so when I wrote This Time Next Year, I had a day job and I also have 2 children. So I had to be very, very regimented about when I wrote. I basically got back from work at 5:30, gave my kids tea, put them to bed. They screamed. I screamed at them. I finally sat down to write at 8, and I basically had to just write between 8 and 11. And I knew I had to do 5,000 words a week in order to hit my deadline. So every time I had my 3 hours, I had to do 1,200 words. So it was very, very kind of tight in a way. And then I've been very, very lucky because This Time Next Year has done quite well. So now I've quit my job and I'm doing writing full time, which I thought, oh, great. Now I'm going to be writing like 10,000 words a week. I'm going to be boshing this out of the park. In reality, now I don't have that tight structure. I'm finding it a lot harder to write, actually.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Because I basically now have kind of 9 till 2:30 because I sort of still see my children in the afternoon and it's around the school day. And weirdly, when you've got, I think I'm just a night person. And also I just, when you're sitting down at 8 and you can't go to bed until you've done your words, you don't procrastinate in the same way in terms of looking at social media and just knocking about basically. Whereas I think now I have what feels like a lot of a longer day. I just sort of end up doing a bit of house admin and go for a little walk to get my, creative juices flowing. And then I've got quite a lot of promo to be doing for the first book. So I'll just be kind of writing a little article here or going on Twitter or checking where my book is on Amazon. And then before you know it, I haven't actually written anything. So I'm really behind.
Speaking of Amazon at the moment, I think it's number 2 in 2 categories and number 4 in another.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah. Has it got to number 1 or is this on the way?
No, so I think at the moment it's 37 in the total Kindle ebook charts, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And then I think it's 2 in Women's Saga and Rom-Coms.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's gone on to a Kindle deal this month and it was on a BookBub at the first as well. That was a really nice combination just to heighten exposure to it. So fingers crossed it stays there. Yeah,
well, let's hope it gets there. I mean, do you I was going to say, do you think these sort of things work? But obviously you spoke quite highly of BookBub there. In terms of new writers, have you got any tips for any new writers that are looking to start writing or release their first book?
So sorry, would you say in terms of the writing process or in terms of getting it published?
Maybe both or whichever one you prefer. I don't mind.
So I think in the writing process, I'd say, the thing that really worked for me was having that really strict deadline of how many words you had to achieve a week. And, for me, it just meant if someone asked me out on a Friday night and I hadn't hit my word count, I just had to say no. And I think I had a very tight deadline because I had to finish this book in, 9 months. And I think if there's any way that you can self-impose that deadline on yourself, even if you don't have a writing contract, I had a friend who got a friend to say, if I haven't sent you 5,000 words at the end of each week, then I have to pay the political party I don't follow a contribution of like, £100 or some kind of penalty like that they basically invented for themselves. Or I have to give you my favorite, I don't know, whatever. But I just think we as people are just such procrastinators, and we'll just do whatever we can not to write, even if you really want to write, which is the irony. So I think any like tightly imposed structure and deadline is really helpful. And then in terms of actually getting published and getting it out there, I'd say just having an agent who really gets you and believes in you. And again, I got my agent because I won this competition. So by winning the competition, I was able to write to agents and say, oh, I won this Love at First Write, you know, will you take a look at my work? And so I think competitions are brilliant. If it's like short stories or, you know, first writing, or there's so many wonderful competitions on, and I think that can be a really good toe in the water to writing, because I think finishing a full manuscript and sending it off is very, very daunting, and I think it can also be really demoralizing. When I wrote my sci-fi manuscript, you know, that took me years, and then to send it off and have everyone say no, it's then very difficult to pick yourself up again and say, okay, what next? Whereas if you're doing short stories or competitions or samples, it can be a really nice confidence boost, and it can help you on the steps to getting an agent, basically.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you very much.
So, Sophie, we've probably got time to maybe squeeze in one more question. So, my question is, it sounds a bit morbid, but at the end of your writing life, what is success going to look like for you?
Oh, good question. You know, this was an interesting one as well, actually, because I was talking to my husband about retiring ages. He was talking about, oh, my retiring age is going to be 68. And I think the really nice thing about being a writer, I don't think I'll ever, you know, there's no point at which I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I can stop writing books when I'm 69 or something. I'll be writing them as long as I've got hands now. And I think for me, what would feel like a success is having a loyal fan base of people who want to just, when they see a Sophie Cousens come out, they buy it because they like your style and they want to read what you have written. I think, you know, someone like Sophie Kinsella has that brand. There's people who just, they love her style so much, they'll pick up whatever she writes. But I think also maybe having a bit of a journey and actually trying out slightly different things. I think, you know, that would be to be a success in one genre, and then have the backing and the confidence to go and try something else, even if it's under a different name. Or I think variety is also the spice of life. So yeah, for me, I think success would be having a brand that people would just buy your book because they know it's you and they trust your name, but then also maybe having 3 or 4 names, all successful in that way. Not that super ambitious, but yeah.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. But before we do shoot off, can you please let everyone know that's listening where they can find your work and what they can look out for?
So yes, so basically this time next year, it's currently out on ebook. So you can get this on Amazon or anywhere else that you buy your ebooks. And then it's coming out as a paperback on the 15th of October. You can also buy it as an audiobook recorded by the amazing Hannah Arterton. So that's also anywhere you buy your Audible audiobooks. And yeah, 15th of October, it's coming out as a paperback in all good bookshops, hopefully.
Amazing.
So,
fantastic.
Yeah,
so thank you again so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, and I really hope that book gets to #1. So if you're listening, please go out and buy that now.
Yeah, only 99p the whole of September, so now's the time to get it. Yeah, it's on special offer.
Yeah, we will share those links below, and again, we wish you all the best for this release, and hope your sci-fi book gets there.
Yeah.
One day. One day.
Lovely to speak to you both. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.